Why did the captain's voice tremble like that? 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, where silence and routine were supposed to cradle the passengers, something cracked through the calm. His words weren't the kind of words you expected to hear when you'd paid for a ticket, stowed your bag, and settled in for a quiet overnight flight. If there are any combat pilots on board, please come forward immediately. The sentence echoed down the narrow cabin, ricocheting off tray tables, plastic armrests, and half-sleeping minds. At first, it didn't seem real. Heads lifted, brows furrowed, passengers whispered nervously. Some thought it might be a joke, a misunderstanding, or maybe turbulence had rattled the captain harder than the rest of them. But then silence, heavy, uneasy. In row 10, a young woman stirred. She had been sleeping not peacefully but heavily, the way exhaustion forces the body to surrender. Her hood had slipped halfway down, tangled with earbuds that no longer played music. A red paperback rested against her chest, its spine cracked and worn. Her hair, tied loosely at the back, had fallen across her cheek. To anyone watching, she was just another passenger. Tired, unremarkable, invisible. But her heart didn't feel invisible now. It slammed awake, as if the captain's words had ripped open a part of her she had tried to bury long ago. Combat pilots. The phrase alone brought her pulse to a dangerous rhythm. Why would a commercial jet need a combat pilot? Her name was Elena Carter, 29, former U.S. Air Force. Call sign Viper. Once she had been a fighter pilot. Once the sky had been both her weapon and her home. But she had walked away 2 years ago, carrying scars no uniform could hide. She had sworn never to return, never again to answer the call that always took more than it gave. And yet here it was again, the call. Her fingers twitched as if her muscles remembered before her mind allowed her to. The way her hand used to rest on a throttle, the way her grip once molded perfectly to the yoke. She tried to ignore it, to sink back into her seat, close her eyes, pretend she hadn't heard. Someone else would move, someone else would stand. But the silence in the cabin only grew thicker. No one stood. Elena's chest tightened. She thought of her last mission, the one that ended it all. The mission she never spoke about, not even to her family. Flames in the sky. A wingman's scream cutting into static. The brutal emptiness of a cockpit beside hers, suddenly gone. She carried that memory like a wound that never healed, even when the skin looked whole. Her seatbelt felt like it was strangling her. She unbuckled slowly, the metallic click loud in the hush of row 10. A man across the aisle watched her curiously, then leaned back as if afraid of what he might see. She rose, not quickly, not dramatically, just enough to feel her legs steady under her. Her instincts were at war with her desire to stay invisible. She wanted peace. That's why she had boarded this flight, just another passenger, headphones in, hoodie up, no questions asked. But peace had never been hers to keep. She walked down the aisle, every step drew more eyes, more whispers. "Who is she?" someone muttered. "What's going on?" another asked. She ignored them all, her jaw clenched, her gaze fixed forward. The cockpit door opened. What waited inside was worse than she imagined. The captain was pale, his forehead wet with sweat, his grip on the controls desperate but shaky. Beside him, the co-pilot slumped unconscious, oxygen mask tilted uselessly at his side. Warning alarms wailed in shrill protest from every direction. Red lights blinked furiously on the panels, the way a heart monitor screams when something is terribly wrong. The storm outside clawed at the aircraft. Lightning cracked through the sky, turning every window into a strobe of chaos. The plane lurched. Passengers screamed. Oxygen masks dropped with mechanical indifference. The captain's voice cracked. "We lost autopilot. My co-pilot's out cold. Controls are damaged. If I go, this plane goes with me." Elena froze. She hadn't touched a cockpit in 2 years. Commercial jets weren't F-16s, they were bigger, slower, heavier. They didn't twist and roll like the jets she had danced in combat, but the language of flight was universal. Altitude, thrust, lift, drag, the bones of aviation were in her blood. She inhaled once, sharp and steady. "I can do this," she said. Her voice didn't tremble. The captain's wide, exhausted eyes darted toward her. "Who are you?" She met his gaze. "Viper, U.S. Air Force, retired. I'm taking the co-pilot seat." He didn't question again. He simply nodded, sliding back enough for her to fit in. Her hands touched the yoke. The metal felt strange, unfamiliar, yet achingly known, like holding an old friend after years apart. The storm roared louder, winds battering the plane from all sides. Passengers clung to each other in the cabin, faces pale, prayers whispered. A little girl buried her face into her mother's chest, asking if they were going to die. But Elena didn't let herself hear it. Her world narrowed to the instruments, the flashing numbers, the stubborn resistance of a machine barely holding itself together. "Left engine fluctuating," she muttered, her instincts scanning before the captain could. "Hydraulics failing," he added. "Then we fly it like a crippled bird," she replied. Her voice was steel. She moved the yoke. The plane answered sluggishly as if it too was exhausted. She coaxed it, not fought it, guiding it through the storm the way she once guided her jet through enemy fire. Precision was everything. Too much, the plane would snap. Too little, they would plummet. Her arms ached within minutes. Her nerves burned with old ghosts. She remembered her squadron. She remembered the explosion. She remembered the names etched in stone, names she carried like broken wings. She wanted to cry, to scream, but instead she whispered only to herself, "Not this time." Outside, lightning flashed again, illuminating her face in harsh white. In that instant, she didn't look like a passenger in row 10. She looked like what she truly was, a fighter, caught between the wreckage of her past and the fragile lives of strangers who now depended on her. The captain watched her work, his voice tight, fuel draining fast, storm not letting up. Elena steadied her breathing. There's always a way through. For hours, she wrestled the storm. Minutes blurred into a battle against forces no human could truly control. Passengers prayed, sobbed, promised God things they might never fulfill. And in the midst of it all, Elena Carter, the woman who once vowed never to fly again, was the only reason 300 souls hadn't already fallen into the ocean below. Somewhere deep inside her, beneath the guilt, the fear, the memories she tried to bury, something stirred. Not pride, not heroism, but purpose. A reminder that maybe she hadn't been born just to suffer loss. Maybe she had been given wings for moments like this. Her muscles shook, but her grip held. Her mind screamed, but her heart steadied. Row 10 was gone. Row 10 didn't exist anymore. There was only the cockpit, the storm, and the lives tethered to her hands. And still one thought pulsed in the back of her mind, haunting, insistent. Would she save them, or fail again? What if the storm never ended? That thought stabbed through Elena's mind as she forced her arms steady on the controls. The aircraft shuddered, groaning like a wounded animal, every jolt threatening to rip it apart. Her knuckles were white against the yoke. Sweat clung to her brow, slid down her temple, but her eyes never wavered from the instruments. The captain's voice broke the silence between alarms. "You've done this before, haven't you?" She didn't answer at first. The question was too dangerous. It wasn't about flight hours or skill. It was about the ghosts that pressed against her ribs, the ones she had spent 2 years trying to bury under silence and distance. Instead, she muttered, altitude dropping, stabilizers sluggish, give me trim adjustment. He obeyed, fumbling with switches, his hands trembling. The plane dipped hard. Screams erupted from the cabin. A food cart, left unsecured, rolled violently down the aisle, smashing against a row of seats. Luggage compartments rattled overhead. The storm outside was relentless, wind sheer ripping against the wings, lightning carving white scars across the sky. Elena's voice cut through the chaos, low and sharp. "Hold together, come on, hold with me." It wasn't clear if she was speaking to the jet or herself. Her chest ached with every breath. Her body remembered the weight of G-forces, the whiplash of evasive maneuvers in combat, but this was different. This was heavier, slower, and so much more fragile. She could almost hear the voice of her instructor from years ago: "Don't fight the storm. Ride it, feel it, make it work for you." But the last time she tried to ride a storm, she lost everything. Her mind snapped back unbidden to that mission. A mountain ridge, radio chatter breaking with panic, the flash of a missile tailing her wingman, the explosion that ripped apart not only a jet but half her soul. His last words echoing through static: "I've got your six," cut off mid-sentence, forever unfinished. The guilt tightened her chest like a vice. She had been the one who survived, and she never forgave herself for it. Now, 300 strangers trusted her hands not to fail. Could she really hold them all? Could she carry them safely when she couldn't even carry the weight of her own past? The captain studied her, eyes flicking from the storm ahead to the woman beside him. "You left the Air Force, didn't you?" Elena didn't answer. She couldn't. Her jaw locked, her eyes focused on the horizon where nothing but black clouds and lightning waited. The silence between them stretched until he whispered, almost reverently, "You're the only reason we're still alive right now." Her breath hitched, but she pushed the words aside. Praise was heavier than criticism. It demanded she live up to it. She wasn't sure she could. A sudden alarm shrieked. The fuel gauge dipped lower, lower, faster than it should. Her stomach dropped. "We've got a leak." The captain cursed under his breath, scanning. "We won't make it across the Atlantic at this burn rate." Options spun in her mind. Emergency diversion routes, nearest bases, weather maps she didn't have. She closed her eyes for half a second, imagining where they might be. Then she spoke firmly. "We need a coastal base. Nearest strip we can find. Get me comms." He nodded, flicked switches, static filling the cabin. For agonizing seconds, only white noise hissed back. Then, "This is tower control. Identify yourself." The relief in Elena's chest was almost painful. She grabbed the headset, her voice calm but edged with urgency. "This is Delta 473, former U.S. Air Force pilot at controls, requesting emergency landing clearance. We've got 300 souls on board. Repeat, 300 souls." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then a voice came through, steady, warm. "Copy that, Viper. You're clear to land. We'll light the strip. You're not alone." Viper, she hadn't heard that name in years. The way the controller spoke it, respectful, almost reverent, twisted something inside her. That call sign had once been her pride. Now it was a ghost. Her grip tightened. "Acknowledged, we're coming in hot." The captain exhaled hard, his shoulders slumping for the first time. He looked at her, not as a stranger from row 10, but as a lifeline. "You really are Viper?" She didn't reply. Her eyes were locked on the storm, narrowing into slits of determination. The turbulence grew worse, tossing the jet like a toy. Passengers screamed again as overhead bins popped open, belongings spilling into the aisles. A baby wailed. Someone shouted a prayer. Somewhere, a little girl asked in a trembling whisper, "Is she an angel?" Elena heard it, even over the storm, even through the chaos. Her throat tightened. She couldn't let herself believe it. Angels didn't fail. Angels didn't carry guilt like lead weights in their chests. But she wasn't an angel. She was just a broken pilot trying not to break again. Every second stretched. She fought the controls, her muscles screaming, her vision blurring from fatigue. She forced herself to breathe steady, to focus only on the numbers, the instruments, the storm. Not the passengers, not the memories, not the ghosts. "Fuel critical," the captain muttered, checking again. Elena steadied her grip. "Then we land before it runs out." She could see faint lights through the storm now, tiny pinpricks in the blackness. A runway, a chance, salvation flickering through rain and lightning. But the crosswinds were savage. Every gust threatened to shove the jet off course. Every lurch made her heart stop. The storm wasn't done with them yet. Her arms trembled, Her chest burned, but she held. She whispered again, this time louder, steadier, "Not this time." The runway grew larger, closer. The tower's voice crackled through. "Delta 473, winds at 20 knots cross. Runway slick, proceed with caution." Caution, as if she had any choice left. She lined up the nose. The wheels screamed as they hit asphalt, bounced, then slammed down again. The jet fishtailed under the fury of crosswinds. Her teeth clenched, her body straining with every ounce of strength to keep it steady. Reverse thrust roared, brakes screamed. And then, silence. The aircraft slowed, stopped. For a moment no one breathed. Then the cabin erupted. Applause, sobs, cries of relief, hands raised in prayer and gratitude. Elena's own hands shook violently as she removed the headset. Her lungs burned as if she had just run a marathon at full sprint. The captain looked at her, tears shining in his eyes. "You just saved 300 lives." She shook her head slowly, staring at the trembling of her own fingers. "No, they saved me." It was the truth. In that cockpit with strangers' lives tethered to hers, she had felt something she hadn't in years: purpose. For so long she had believed she didn't deserve to live, not after what she lost, not after who she lost. But tonight, something shifted. When she stepped back into the cabin, passengers rose to their feet. Applause thundered. People reached out, wanting to touch her hand, thank her, cling to her as if she were salvation. A little girl ran forward, wrapped her small arms around Elena's leg and whispered, "Thank you, Angel." Elena smiled through tears she hadn't realized were falling. For the first time in years, the word didn't feel like a lie. But deep inside, beneath the relief, a question gnawed at her. If she could save 300 strangers tonight, why hadn't she been able to save the one person who mattered most? The applause around her blurred. The storm inside her was far from over. Why did the silence after the landing feel louder than the storm itself? Elena sat in the co-pilot's chair, hands still trembling, eyes unfocused as the captain called in the emergency stop. Passengers cried, laughed, prayed, and clapped behind her, but she felt none of it. Relief was supposed to feel lighter. Instead, it pressed heavier on her chest. She stared at the runway lights cutting through the rain-slick asphalt, each glowing beacon reminding her she had survived. Again. And just like before, survival felt like theft. The tower's voice crackled through. "Delta 473, rescue crews on approach. Passengers will be evacuated shortly. Outstanding job, Viper." Her throat tightened at the name. Viper. She hadn't heard it spoken aloud in 2 years. Once it meant pride, belonging, a place among those who lived and died in the skis. Now it sounded like an accusation, a reminder of the pilot she no longer believed she deserved to be. The captain rested a hand on her shoulder. His touch was hesitant, almost reverent. "I don't know what your story is, but tonight you gave 300 people their lives back." She swallowed hard, forcing her eyes away from him. "Don't thank me, just get them home." He studied her but didn't press. He must have seen it in her eyes, the kind of heaviness words couldn't carry. He simply nodded, then turned back to handle the chaos of disembarkation. Elena rose slowly, her legs unsteady, as if she had been fighting not only the storm but gravity itself. When she stepped back into the cabin, the applause hit her like a wall. Faces streaked with tears, hands reaching out, people calling her name even though they didn't know it yet. And then the little girl. The same one who had whispered "Angel" during the storm. She broke free from her mother's arms, rushing down the aisle with innocent urgency. She flung her arms around Elena's waist. "You saved us." Elena froze. Her arms hovered for a heartbeat before she let them fall gently around the child. Her throat closed. She wanted to say something, to tell the girl she wasn't an angel, she wasn't a savior. She was just a broken pilot trying to atone for ghosts that wouldn't leave her alone. But the words died in her mouth. Instead, she whispered, "You're safe now." The girl smiled up at her through tears. "I knew you'd come." The words sliced Elena deeper than she expected. She had heard something like that before, years ago. A voice over comms, strained but trusting. "I've got your six, Viper. I knew you'd be there." But she hadn't been, not when it mattered most. Her chest constricted. She released the girl, gently handing her back to her mother. Applause swelled again as more passengers filed past, patting her arm, thanking her with words that felt too heavy to carry. Hero, angel, lifesaver. She wanted to cover her ears, to drown it out. By the time she stepped onto the tarmac, the cool night rain struck her face like a wake-up call. Emergency vehicles flashed in the distance, crews running to assist, but Elena just stood there for a moment, breathing, feeling the storm inside her rage against the storm outside. She pulled her hoodie up, retreating back into anonymity. She wanted to vanish, to dissolve into the crowd of survivors, but anonymity was no longer hers, not after tonight. "Miss Carter," a voice stopped her. She turned sharply. A man in a reflective vest stood there, headset crooked around his neck. His expression was careful, respectful. "Tower wants a word," they said. "Viper." Her blood ran cold. She shook her head instinctively. "I'm not her anymore." But the man only nodded, unfazed. "They said you'd say that, and they said, tell her it's not over." The words hit like turbulence she couldn't control. "It's not over." Her breath caught. She turned away without answering, her pulse racing. Not over. How could it not be over? She had walked away. She had promised herself she was done with war, with death, with the endless cost of service. She had traded her wings for silence. But silence was a lie. As passengers were loaded onto buses and emergency crews worked around her, Elena slipped away. She didn't want to be paraded in front of cameras, didn't want her face plastered across headlines as the angel of row 10. All she wanted was the anonymity she had tried so hard to protect. She found a quiet corner of the terminal, away from the chaos. She sank into a plastic chair, burying her face in her hands. Her arms ached from hours on the controls. Her eyes burned from exhaustion. But it was her heart that felt truly broken. A voice echoed in her memory again. Male, warm, familiar. "I knew you'd come, Viper." She clenched her fists. He had believed in her, trusted her, and she had let him down. The mission had gone wrong, the missile had struck, and she had been the one who lived. Survivor's guilt wasn't something time erased. It was a scar that reopened every time she closed her eyes. A soft voice startled her. "You okay?" Elena lifted her head, the little girl again. She had slipped away from her mother, clutching a stuffed rabbit in her arms. She looked at Elena with those same wide, innocent eyes. Elena forced a smile. "You should be with your mom." The girl nodded but didn't move. "She said you're a hero." Elena swallowed hard, her throat aching. "I'm not a hero." The girl tilted her head, curious. "Then what are you?" The question hung in the air like lightning waiting to strike. Elena had no answer. She had been many things: a daughter, a soldier, a pilot, a failure. But hero, that word felt like a costume she could never wear without it tearing at the seams. Before she could respond, the girl's mother appeared, rushing forward to scoop her up. She mouthed a hurried thank you to Elena before whisking her child away. And just like that, Elena was alone again. The sound of rain against the glass windows filled the silence. She sat there, motionless, feeling the storm inside her roar louder than the one outside. A hero, an angel, a pilot, a survivor. She didn't feel like any of them. She felt like a fraud who had somehow stumbled into saving lives by accident. But deep down, beneath the layers of guilt and pain, one truth whispered, a truth she wasn't ready to face yet. Tonight hadn't been an accident. It had been instinct, training, purpose clawing its way back to the surface. And if purpose could find her once, what if it wasn't done with her yet? What do you do when the world calls you something you don't believe you are? Hero, angel, savior. Elena heard those words echoing long after the passengers were gone, long after the flashing ambulance lights faded, long after the applause quieted into the steady hum of an empty terminal. She sat alone in a corner seat near a darkened gate, hoodie pulled over her head, watching rain streak down the wide glass windows. Her reflection stared back at her, hollow eyes, hair matted by sweat, lips pressed into a thin line. To the world, she had just saved 300 lives. To herself, she had only reopened a wound that never healed. Her phone buzzed. She almost didn't look, but the vibration kept pulsing against the plastic chair. Unknown number. She answered with hesitation, lifting it to her ear. Viper. Her blood froze. The voice was steady, male, calm in a way that suggested discipline and authority. Military. You did well tonight. She swallowed hard. Who is this? You know who it is. Her chest tightened. She hadn't heard that voice in years. Command. The last man who had spoken to her after the mission that destroyed her squadron. The one who signed her discharge papers, stamped her file with quiet regret. Don't call me that, she whispered, eyes darting around as if anyone nearby might hear. I'm not Viper anymore. A pause then. You can bury the name, but you can't bury what you are. Elena's jaw clenched. I'm done. I walked away. You thought you were done. Tonight proves otherwise. Her stomach twisted. She wanted to hang up, to shut him out, but something in his tone pinned her there. He wasn't congratulating her. He wasn't manipulating her. He was stating something she already feared, that no matter how far she ran, her past would always find her. Why are you calling? She demanded. There was another pause, heavier this time. Then, because the storm isn't over, and neither is your war. The line went dead. Elena lowered the phone slowly, staring at the black screen as if it might burn her hand. She pressed her forehead into her palm, her pulse thundering in her ears. The storm isn't over, neither is your war. She wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as cryptic nonsense, but deep inside, a knot twisted tighter, because he was right. She had walked away, but the war never walked away from her. Memories dragged her back without mercy. 2 years ago, a mountain ridge somewhere no map named out loud. She and her squadron had been tasked with a routine patrol, or at least, that's what the briefing had called it. But there are no routine patrols in combat. She remembered the chatter in her headset, the camaraderie that felt like family. Jokes traded between call signs, the sound of laughter bouncing through the skis. And then the sudden scream of a missile lock warning. Red lights flashing, her heart slamming. Her wingman ghost had been on her right. He was steady, always steady, the kind of pilot who never lost his cool. He'd laughed into his mic even as alarms blared. Relax, Viper, I've got your 6. But then the streak of fire, the split-second explosion, the shockwave that tore the sky apart. Her cockpit rattled, alarms shrieking, her breath tearing in her chest. She had spun through smoke and flame, screaming his name. No response, just static. She landed alone that night, and she never forgave herself. Because she was the one who lived, and in her mind, living meant failing. She pressed her palms to her face now in the empty terminal, her body curling in on itself. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the fireball again, heard his voice cut off mid-sentence. I've got your 6, then nothing. Passengers had called her an angel tonight, but Ghost's face reminded her what she truly believed she was, a fraud. Excuse me. Elena jerked her head up, startled. A man in uniform stood a few feet away, not military but airport security. His stance was careful, respectful. Ma'am, there's media outside. They're asking for the pilot who landed the jet. Her chest locked. I'm not. He raised his hands quickly. I told them you'd already left. Just figured you'd want to know. Relief tangled with fear. She nodded once, muttering, thank you. He gave her a curious look, as if sensing her unease but didn't press. He walked away, leaving her alone again with the storm in her chest. Media, cameras, headlines, the angel of row 10. The thought made her stomach churn. She hadn't saved those passengers for recognition. She had saved them because she couldn't let herself fail again. And yet, even now, it didn't feel like redemption. It felt like a debt unpaid. Her phone buzzed again. This time a text, no name, just coordinates. Her breath hitched. She knew what it meant. Someone wanted her back. She stared at the numbers glowing on her screen. Part of her wanted to delete them, to smash the phone, to run until she disappeared into anonymity again. But another part, the part she hated, felt something else. A pull, a spark, a whisper of the skis calling her name. Because deep down she knew the truth, she wasn't done. She pressed the phone tight in her hand, whispering to the empty terminal, "I don't want this." But the storm outside thundered louder, as if answering, "It doesn't matter what you want. The sky still owns you." What happens when running is no longer possible? Elena asked herself that question as she stood outside the terminal, hood pulled tight over her head, the night air thick with rain and the sharp tang of jet fuel. Reporters had gathered beyond the barricades, cameras flashing, voices shouting questions she didn't want to hear. She slipped past them like a shadow, keeping her head low, her steps quick. The coordinates on her phone glowed in her pocket like a brand. She hadn't looked at them again, but she didn't need to. They pulsed in her mind, a reminder of the war she had left behind. She told herself she wouldn't go. She told herself she would board the next flight, vanish into anonymity, disappear into the crowd of ordinary lives. She told herself she deserved peace. But as she walked through the rain, something heavier weighed on her chest, the look in that little girl's eyes, the words she had whispered, "I knew you'd come." Why had they cut so deep? Because once someone else had said them, and Elena had failed him. Her hand clenched around the strap of her bag. She wanted to scream at the storm, to demand why life wouldn't let her stay buried, why survival always came with chains, why ghosts refused to let go. She reached the edge of the terminal where taxis waited in long, impatient lines. One pulled forward, its wipers slapping frantically at the rain. The driver leaned out, waving. "Need a ride?" She hesitated, to the hotel, to a bus, to anywhere but where those coordinates led. That was the rational choice, that was the safe choice. But safety had never belonged to her. She slid into the backseat, water dripping from her hoodie onto cracked vinyl seats. "Take me downtown," she muttered. The cab pulled away, city lights blurring through the rain-streaked window. Elena leaned her head against the glass, closing her eyes. She thought she might rest, just for a moment, but her mind betrayed her. 2 years ago, after the mission, the debrief room had been sterile, cold. She had sat there in silence, hands clenched, uniform stiff with smoke and sweat. Command had spoken words she barely heard, complications, unforeseen circumstances, losses incurred, losses, as if Ghost had been a number, a statistic, a footnote in a report. She had stood, saluted, and walked out, and she never went back. The cab stopped suddenly, jolting her from the memory. "Downtown," the driver said. She paid without looking, stepping into streets slick with rain and neon. The city hummed with life, people rushing with umbrellas, headlights glinting across puddles, sirens wailing in the distance. She pulled her hood lower and kept walking, searching for anonymity in the crowd. But anonymity slipped away when she saw the man waiting. He stood beneath a flickering street lamp, hands in his coat pockets, eyes sharp even in shadow. He wasn't uniformed, but his bearing gave him away. Military through and through, discipline carved into his posture, command in his silence. "Elena," he said as she approached, "not Viper, Elena." Her throat tightened. "How did you find me?" He gave a small, humorless smile. "We never lost you." She looked away, jaw clenched. "If you came here to drag me back, you're wasting your time." "I didn't come to drag you," he said softly. "I came to remind you." Her eyes snapped to his. "Remind me of what? That I failed, that Ghost is gone because of me." His expression didn't change, but his voice lowered. "Remind you that the sky still needs you, and that war doesn't care if you've quit." Her breath came sharp, uneven. "I told myself I was done. I told myself I'd never." "But you did," he interrupted, his tone cutting but not cruel. "You answered the call tonight. You sat in that cockpit when no one else could. You saved lives, Elena. Don't tell me you're done when your instincts betray you." She wanted to argue, to scream that he didn't understand, that saving strangers wasn't the same as saving family, that no victory erased the guilt of one loss, but her voice broke instead. "I couldn't save him." For the first time his eyes softened. "You couldn't. None of us could. But if you spend the rest of your life punishing yourself, you dishonor what he stood for. Ghost had your six, even in the end. What makes you think he'd want you to lay down your wings?" Her chest constricted. She turned away, fighting the burn in her eyes. The rain masked her tears, but it didn't hide the tremor in her breath. He stepped closer, his voice quieter. "The coordinates we sent you, it's not just a mission. It's a chance. Something's happening, something bigger than you think. And we need pilots who don't just fly, we need pilots who understand what it means to carry lives in their hands. You proved tonight that you still do." She closed her eyes. Silence pressed in around them, broken only by the hiss of rain on asphalt. Her fists clenched at her sides, nails digging into her palms. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "And if I go, if I step back into this, then you'll stop running." The words cut her deeper than any reprimand, because he was right. She had been running since that night. From the sky, from herself, from the pain of being the one left alive. She opened her eyes, staring into the rain-slick street. "And if I fail again?" He met her gaze without flinching. "Then you fail forward, but at least you'll have tried." Her breath hitched. For years she had avoided trying at all, terrified of failure, haunted by loss. But tonight in that cockpit, with 300 souls tethered to her hands, she had tried. And she hadn't failed. The thought shook her more than the storm ever could. The man extended a hand, not commanding, not forcing, simply offering. "The choice is yours, Elena, always has been." Her eyes dropped to his hand. For a long moment she didn't move. The rain drummed harder, pooling around their feet, washing neon light into broken colors. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with something sharper. Not peace, not yet, but maybe purpose. She didn't take his hand, not yet, but she didn't walk away either. Instead, she whispered, "Where do the coordinates lead?" What if the coordinates weren't just numbers? That question gnawed at Elena as she lay awake in a dim motel room hours later, staring at the cracked ceiling while rain tapped against the window. She hadn't taken his hand under the street lamp, but she hadn't walked away either. And that terrified her more than the storm she'd flown through. Her phone rested on the nightstand, screen dark, but the numbers burned in her mind as if tattooed behind her eyelids. Latitude, longitude, a point on the map that waited for her, daring her to come closer. She told herself she wouldn't go. She whispered it into the darkness like a prayer. "I won't go, I can't." But sleep never came. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back in the cockpit, 300 lives clinging to her every move. The little girl whispering, "I knew you'd come," the captain's voice breaking with relief. And beneath all of it, Ghost's unfinished words echoing, "I've got your six, cut off forever." At dawn, she gave up. She showered, dressed in the same hoodie and jeans, tied her hair back. She looked at herself in the mirror, a stranger. Not Viper, not a pilot, just a woman pretending she could still disappear. But when she picked up her phone, her fingers betrayed her. The map app glowed, the coordinates dropping a pin on a coastal airbase, half abandoned, half operational. Military, but off the books. She cursed under her breath, "Damn it." By noon, she was on a bus heading south. The ride was long, the seats uncomfortable, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and damp clothes. Around her, ordinary passengers read newspapers, scrolled phones, slept with heads pressed against windows. None of them knew who she was. None of them knew the war she carried in silence. She envied them. Every bump of the road rattled old memories. She saw herself in uniform again, helmet tucked under her arm, walking the tarmac with her squadron. She remembered the laughter, the brotherhood, the feeling of belonging. And she remembered how quickly it had all turned to ash. Her chest ached. She pressed a fist against it as if she could force the pain deeper where it couldn't escape, but it always escaped. By the time the bus dropped her at a desolate road near the coast, the sky had cleared. The storm was gone, leaving the air sharp and cold, the kind of clarity that made every shadow feel sharper. She walked, miles maybe, past rusted fences and forgotten hangars, past silence broken only by gulls circling overhead, until she saw it. The base. It wasn't much, a strip of runway cutting into scrubland, a few hangars still intact, a radar dish turning lazily as if half asleep. But there were signs of life. Soldiers in plain fatigues, vehicles parked with precision, guards stationed at the gate. Elena's stomach tightened. This wasn't official. This was something else. She approached the gate slowly, hood low, hands shoved in her pockets. A guard stepped forward, rifle slung across his chest, eyes sharp. Name. She hesitated, her throat locked. She wanted to say Elena Carter, just that. No titles, no ghosts. But the word slipped out before she could stop it. Viper. The guard's expression didn't change, but he lifted a hand to his calm. She's here. The gates opened. Elena's pulse hammered as she stepped through, the sound of her boots against asphalt dragging her back into a world she had sworn off. Every part of her screamed to turn back, but something stronger pulled her forward. Inside, the man from the street lamp was waiting. He wore no insignia, no rank, but his authority radiated. He nodded once. You came. She glared at him, curiosity, not commitment. He smirked faintly. Curiosity is the first step. He led her into a hangar. The smell of oil and metal hit her immediately. Inside, technicians moved with quiet efficiency around a sleek aircraft. Not commercial, not standard. Something between a fighter and a recon jet, stripped of markings, built for missions that didn't officially exist. Elena's breath caught despite herself. The sight of a cockpit stirred something raw inside her. The man watched her carefully. You haven't flown in 2 years, and yet 2 nights ago you kept a crippled jet in the sky when every instrument said it should have gone down. That's not luck. That's instinct. That's who you are. She tore her gaze from the jet, jaw tight. You think one emergency landing means I'm ready to jump back into war? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I think you've been waiting for a reason to stop punishing yourself, and this is it. Her fists clenched. You don't know me. His eyes didn't waver. I know the look of someone who's haunted, and I know the only way to silence ghosts is to face them. She turned away, her chest heaving. The hangar's hum filled the silence, technicians murmuring as they worked. The aircraft gleamed beneath fluorescent lights, a predator waiting to be unleashed. Elena closed her eyes. For a moment she imagined herself climbing into that cockpit, strapping in, feeling the throttle under her hand, the sky opening ahead. She imagined Ghost's voice in her ear, steady as always. I've got your 6, Viper. Her throat tightened. She opened her eyes again, forcing the vision away. I came to see, that's all. The man studied her, nodding as if he expected her resistance. Then see, but don't lie to yourself. You're already halfway back. Elena walked closer to the jet, her steps slow, reluctant. She reached out almost without thinking, fingertips brushing the cool metal of its wing. The touch sent a shiver through her. She whispered, barely audible, I said I was done. But the aircraft said nothing. The silence answered for her. And deep inside she knew the truth. She wasn't done, not yet. What if walking away again meant abandoning more than herself? That thought clawed at Elena as she stood in the hangar, staring at the aircraft she refused to admit was calling her name. Its polished frame reflected harsh fluorescent light, its cockpit open like an invitation or maybe a trap. She told herself she was only looking, only remembering, only reminding herself why she had quit. But her hand still trembled from where she had touched the wing. Behind her, voices murmured. The technicians gave her space, but their glances lingered, quiet and curious. They knew who she was, or at least who she used to be. Viper, the woman who had disappeared into shadows after losing her squadron. The pilot who once carved through skis with the kind of precision no machine could teach. The man from the street lamp, her old commander, though he hadn't called himself that, finally broke the silence. "You're not here by accident." Elena turned sharply. "I didn't agree to anything. You texted me coordinates, that's all." "And you came." She hated that he was right. She hated that her body betrayed her long before her mind gave in. She could have ignored the message, could have destroyed the phone, could have run further into anonymity, but she hadn't, because somewhere inside her the storm hadn't settled. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You think you've been hiding, but really you've been waiting. You just didn't know for what." Her jaw tightened. "You don't know me." He studied her with maddening patience. "I know loss, I know guilt. I know what it does when you let it eat at you long enough. And I know the only way forward isn't away, it's through." Her chest ached, his words pressing against the part of her she kept buried. She wanted to deny it, to spit back that he was wrong, but her silence betrayed her. The technicians wheeled equipment past, metal clattering against concrete. One of them, a young woman with sharp eyes and grease streaked across her cheek, glanced at Elena and smirked faintly. "Didn't think the legend was real," she said under her breath. Elena froze. "Legend?" The woman shrugged, wiping her hands on a rag. "Stories go around. The pilot who vanished after the Ridge mission, the one who survived what no one else could, the one they called Viper." Elena's throat tightened. She didn't want to be a story. Stories always left out the part that mattered, the failure, the guilt, the truth. "Don't call me that," she muttered. The woman only smiled, unfazed. "Doesn't matter what you call yourself. Sky remembers." Then she walked away, leaving Elena trembling. "Sky remembers," the words echoed. Ghost's voice stirred again in her memory. "I've got your 6, Viper." Her fists clenched. She spun on her heels, storming out of the hangar into the crisp coastal air. She needed distance, needed space to breathe. The runway stretched ahead of her, endless, fading into horizon. For a moment she stood there, the sea wind lashing against her face, the smell of salt and fuel tangling together. She closed her eyes. She could almost hear the roar of engines, the thunder of takeoff. "Running again." The voice snapped her eyes open. Not her commander this time, someone else. A man leaned casually against a jeep parked by the runway. Younger than her, maybe late 20s, uniform half unzipped, a grin tugging at his lips. His eyes were bright, curious, sharp. "Who are you?" Elena asked, her voice low. "Call sign Torch," he said with a shrug. "New blood, they said you might show up." She frowned. "And what exactly did they tell you about me?" "That you're the best damn pilot this program ever had." His grin widened, teasing but not mocking. "Also, that you're stubborn as hell." Elena rolled her eyes, turning to walk past him. "Stories are exaggerated." "Maybe," Torch said, falling into step beside her. "But I saw the landing footage. That storm, that jet. You shouldn't have walked away from that in one piece. But you did, and you carried 300 souls with you." Her chest tightened. "I didn't save them, I didn't let them die." He tilted his head, studying her. "That's a hell of a difference to the people on that plane." Elena's pace slowed. The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they held a truth she couldn't bear. She had carried those lives, and for the first time in years she hadn't failed. Torch softened his grin, his voice dropping. "Look, I don't know what ghosts you're dragging behind you, but I do know this: people like us don't get to hide forever. We fly or we fade, and from what I've heard, you were never meant to fade." She stopped walking. His words pierced deeper than he could know. She looked at him, searching his expression for arrogance or bravado, but found only sincerity. It unsettled her more than any storm. He shrugged lightly, gesturing to the runway. They're prepping a sim inside, flight tests. You don't have to take it. You can walk out right now. No one will stop you. Her breath caught. A simulation. A chance to fly without truly flying. A chance to test whether she still had it or whether the sky had already forgotten her. Torch smirked faintly as if reading her thoughts. You want to know the truth? Step in. If you crash, no one dies. If you don't, maybe you'll finally believe what the rest of us already know. Elena's hands curled into fists. She wanted to say no, to turn her back, to run. But instead she whispered, "Show me." Torch's grin widened, but he only nodded. This way. They walked back into the hangar, past the gleaming aircraft, toward a chamber lined with screens and equipment. Technicians worked quickly, adjusting controls, calibrating displays. A sim cockpit waited at the center, identical to the real thing. Elena's pulse thundered. She stared at it, every nerve in her body alive. The commander stepped forward, his expression unreadable. You don't owe us anything, but you owe yourself the truth. Get in. Her throat was dry. She forced her legs to move, climbed the steps, slid into the seat. The harness clicked into place. The controls waited under her hands like old friends she had abandoned. Her breath shook. She closed her eyes for one beat, then opened them. The sim roared to life. And for the first time in 2 years, Elena Carter felt the sky again. What if the simulator wasn't just a machine? That thought struck Elena as the screens flickered to life around her, wrapping her in a panoramic world of sky, storm, and horizon. The roar of engines filled her headset. The cockpit vibrated beneath her hands. Every sense screamed at her, "You're flying again." Her breath caught. For a moment, panic surged, memories crashing down. The ridge, the explosion, Ghost's voice vanishing into static. Her chest tightened so hard she thought she couldn't breathe. She gripped the yoke as if holding it would anchor her to the present. Simulation engaged, a technician's voice said in her ear. Weather program, storm sequence. Ready when you are. Storm sequence. Of course. They didn't want to see if she could fly on a calm day. They wanted to see if she could survive chaos. She muttered under her breath, "Not real, just a sim." But her body didn't believe it. Her muscles remembered too well. The commander's voice crackled into her headset. "You can quit any time. No shame in it. Just say the word." She almost said it, almost. The words were on her tongue, heavy and tempting. But then Torch's voice slid in, casual but steady. "Or you can remind yourself who the hell you are." Elena's jaw locked. She pushed the throttle forward. The jet roared down the simulated runway, wheels screaming before lifting into sky. Her chest tightened as the ground fell away, the horizon spreading endless and wide. The storm loomed ahead, black clouds, lightning, turbulence waiting like an enemy eager to devour her. Her hands shook, her breathing stuttered, but she didn't pull back. The first hit of turbulence jolted the cockpit, the sim shaking hard enough to rattle her teeth. Warnings blared. Crosswinds slammed her. She felt sweat bead down her back. She heard Ghost's voice again. "Relax, Viper, ride it. Don't fight the storm, feel it." Her breath hitched. She forced herself to inhale, to steady, to listen. And for the first time in 2 years, she let herself remember what it felt like to trust the sky. Not as an enemy, not as a punishment, but as something alive, something that demanded respect, not fear. Her movements grew sharper, cleaner. The aircraft responded. She rolled through a pocket of turbulence, corrected the nose, leveled altitude. Her body moved before her mind could question. Instinct reclaimed her. Outside, the glass simulated lightning carved through darkness. The storm roared louder, harder. But inside, something in Elena softened. Her heart still ached. Ghost's voice still haunted. But with every maneuver, every adjustment, every second she kept the jet alive, she felt the weight shift, not disappear, but redistribute. From guilt to purpose, from failure to resolve. The commander's voice came through again, quiet but steady. "You're flying like you never left." She didn't answer, she couldn't. Her throat was too tight. The sim pitched hard, engine screaming, alarms blaring, critical failure mode. The kind of scenario no pilot could fully prepare for. She gasped, hands tightening on the yoke. Her mind snapped back to the ridge, to ghost, to fire and static and loss. "I've got your 6, Viper." Her vision blurred with tears. "I wasn't there," she whispered to the empty cockpit. "I should have been there." The jet bucked hard. The sim screamed warnings. She nearly let go, nearly surrendered. And then a different voice. Small, pure, from memory, the little girl on the plane hugging her leg, whispering, "I knew you'd come." Elena's breath steadied. She gritted her teeth, pulling hard on the controls, fighting the nose up, riding the storm instead of resisting it. The aircraft screamed, shuddered, but leveled. The alarms quieted. The storm broke into patches of light. And she realized she wasn't flying alone. Not anymore, not ever. She whispered, voice raw but steady, "Ghost, I've still got your 6." The sim's horizon cleared. Blue sky opened wide, endless waiting. Her hands trembled as she eased the throttle back, guiding the jet into calm. For the first time in years, the silence in her headset didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like peace. The simulation ended. The screens went black. The cockpit went still. Elena sat there, breathing hard, hands still clenched, tears drying on her cheeks. Slowly she unstrapped, pushing herself out of the seat. Her legs shook as she stepped down, boots hitting the hangar floor. Torch was waiting, arms crossed, grin tugging at his lips. "Told you, you were never meant to fade." She glared at him through glassy eyes, but couldn't find the strength to argue. The commander approached, his face calm but his eyes alight with something close to pride. "You don't need me to tell you what that means." Elena looked away, her throat aching. "It was just a sim." He shook his head. "It was you, that's what matters." She stood in silence, heart still pounding. For years she had carried guilt like a chain, believing she had no right to fly, no right to live with purpose again. But tonight, in a storm, in a sim, in herself, she had found something else. Not absolution, that would never come, but direction. Torch leaned closer, voice softer now. "So, you in?" Elena hesitated. Her gaze drifted back to the aircraft gleaming under the hangar lights. Her fingers flexed at her sides, aching to feel controls again. Her heart whispered what her lips couldn't say. She wasn't done. She turned to the commander, voice low but steady. "If I do this, it's not for redemption, not for medals, not for recognition." He nodded, "Then why?" Her eyes softened, shadows shifting into something almost like light. "For the ones who still need me, and for the ones who never stopped having my 6." Silence stretched. The commander gave a single firm nod. Torch grinned wide like he had known all along. Elena pulled her hood back, letting the harsh light fall on her face. For the first time in years, she didn't hide. She wasn't whole, she wasn't healed, but she was ready. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It doesn't ask for applause, it simply acts. And Elena Carter, Viper, was ready to act again.